I Hate Politics is a podcast about a human activity we love to hate. I am Sunil Dasgupta. The 2022 Maryland primary is over, and we have had a few months of intensely political episodes. But it is summer now, and those of us who are able are emptying out into the mid-Atlantic beaches and campsites across the region. Whether you are one of the lucky ones or staying at home with work and kids, this is an episode to get you outdoors, sometimes surprisingly close to home. I talked to Nishant Trivedi and Pallav Thakkar, members of a local Indian American group that call themselves Desi Walkers and Runners, about their 184.5-mile bike ride from Cumberland in Western Maryland to Washington, D.C. And then I talked to Majority Leader in the State House of Delegates, Eric Ludke, who has also served on the State Parks Investment Commission, which has recommended tens of millions of dollars in new funding for Maryland's park system. And did you know that Maryland has no natural lakes? Not even Deep Creek. Not one.
Let them stay your girl. You'll always have your own. But take something for granted and it will be taken from you. This I've come to know.
If you're new to the show, I Hate Politics is a podcast about our neighborhoods, workplaces, schools, and streets, and our local governments as they function in diverse and democratic societies. This means our politics are messy, dirty, sometimes corrupt, with often self-serving politicians. But no matter how much we may hate politics, we are never exempt from it, even when we refuse to participate. In fact, the purpose of politics is to keep society functioning precisely when we don't agree with each other, like now. It is my hope that this podcast will help those who feel left out reconnect in our local communities. Music for this episode comes from the Treading Lemmings, a Rockville-based Britpop band in the genre of the Smiths. Their music is available on ReverbNation.com.
I gave yesterday. And if you want to hear my take, let there be care. Bust off your day. She's there, I say. Please won't you share? Come share my umbrella.
By the time this episode is out, Montgomery County should have a new county executive. The news here is twofold. One, there has been an inordinate delay in vote counting. Though most other races, the margins became wide enough so that they could be called. The county executive race between incumbent Mark Elrich and businessman David Blair has been neck and neck and continues at this moment, almost as if nothing has changed since 2018, when Elrich prevailed by 77 votes. The redux of the Elrich-Blair race from 2018 suggests not just absence of political change, but also the limitations of money in politics. We like to think that money is determinative of political outcomes, but really it is not the final word. Even if Blair becomes the new county executive, that's $10 million of his money spent across two campaigns for what is likely to be the slimmest of margins of victory, which may have very little to do with actual campaign spending. Don't get me wrong, campaigns don't run on love and fresh air, but winning contested seats is about more than just money. Among many other reasons, the close races are not close because society is divided and voting in record numbers. Indeed, primary races are close because the turnout is low. And where primary elections are more important than the general in determining who governs, this can be a real problem. The U.S. Department of Health and Human Services Office of Disease Prevention has identified increasing the proportion of the voting age citizens who vote as a determinant of health. Needless to say, this is also true of public education, climate action, housing, for every policy area. But in Big D Democratic Montgomery County, is this true? Low voter turnout leads, in fact, to the absence of strong mandates for elected leaders. Doesn't matter who wins, both Eldridge and Blair are too close in the number of votes to claim a mandate. The result is political stasis across several issue areas, even when there is consensus in society about the need to act. Climate inaction is a great example. Agreement without action. Educational equity. Agreement without action. This is the real cost of low voter turnout. One noteworthy outcome of the primary is that the Apple ballot, the endorsement of the Montgomery County Education Association, the teachers union, seems to have made a comeback after some years of losing its potency. Several candidates with lackluster campaigns nevertheless outperformed others based on the fact that they had the Apple ballot endorsement. But enough politics talk. Let's go out and bike, or in this case, talk biking with Nishant Trivedi and Pallav Thakkar, who took a 184.5, that point 5 is very important, 184.5 mile bike ride from Cumberland, Maryland to Washington, D.C. Nishant Trivedi, Pallav Thakkar, welcome to I Hate Politics.
Thank you, Sunil.
Thanks, Sunil.
The two of you, together with a bunch of others, took this incredible bike ride, 180 miles, I believe.
84, yeah.
Yeah, we cannot miss those 4 miles.
It's important. To take you home.
Actually, it's 184.5 miles from Cumberland to DC. Yeah.
That's right. The last half mile is the most important one. Describe the trip. When did you start? Where did you go? How long did it take?
Yeah, so it was April 28th. It was a Thursday. The trip we had planned to be the 29th, 30th. So that weekend, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Mm-hmm. Thursday was our travel day. So we took Thursday to get all the riders and all the bikes to Cumberland. The trip was split into 3 chunks, I guess you could say, approximately 60, 65 miles each day. On the first day, the nightly stop was at the Hancock, 1/3 of the way down. And it was at a Super 8 hotel.
I have no idea how long it takes to ride 60 miles.
We tried to keep a consistent pace of 10 miles per hour. But we did have a stop where I think we stopped at Pawpaw, which is a tunnel. When it's open, it used to be back in the day, it's pretty much like a half a mile tunnel that you just cross through. But because of some constructions going on, you have to take a detour, and detour is a hike. So there are 2 detours. One goes through a road route. We decided not to take the main roads, and we decided to hike up the mountain. So that was an exciting, experience.
So you just carried your bike? How did you do that?
No, so we rolled our bikes up. Some of us were very excited for being the first day, and we decided to, ride it up. So some of them did halfway or, 1/4 of the way, but then they had to get up because with the weight that you have in the back, and the incline Actually, Pallav and I, we were discussing the other day, and we were trying to figure out what the gradient was. And Pallav calculated it to be 4.3. That's pretty steep.
We have about 14, 16 people going together. A few of them had done this route before. Most of us had not. But there was a mix of, skill sets. And that sort of presented its own challenges. So some of these folks, like myself, just kind of took the bike that was in the garage and said, let's go. So it was not just experienced riders kind of doing this from start to finish. These experienced riders had to kind of watch the other ones and sort of pace it out. Right. So the first day when we got to Amanda's place, and then afterwards until we got to the Super 8, we had breaks every 10, 12 miles, but nothing more than, 14 miles. So everybody would get a chance to rest. We would get a chance to talk. We would get a chance to see the scenery. So that's sort of the mindset of the group, right? And then the first day after lunch, Paw was that what Nishant was talking about was the adventure. The folks that had been there before were really adamant that, we're going to make everybody do this, climb this mountain and not go to the detour, riding detour that they had.
Right.
And it was challenging, to say the least. Because again, you have to imagine there's this bike that we have. We have 3 days of clothing and some food.
Yeah.
Some of us, like we usually do when we go overseas, we overpack, which we did. And, again, you have to carry all of that with you for the 184-mile ride.
Mm-hmm.
So, on the first day here, you are carrying your clothes and your food, and you're trying to take this bike up a hill. I was done at that point. We had enough pictures. We had enough pictures.
It was hard.
Really, you were thinking of quitting?
No, not really, but it was tiresome.
The second day was, I'm assuming, not that adventurous. And then the third day, it really rained. Yeah.
Second day from Hancock to, what was the second stop? Harper's Ferry.
Uh-huh.
So between that, there is one more detour that you need to take at Big Slackwater. And that one is basically going off road onto the roads. And those are like, countryside roads. They were hilly, a lot of incline, and then you're going down. It was a good ride. But again, it had its own challenges where you had to, haul all the weight up those hills.
Did you all know about the Pawpaw Tunnel and the Big Slackwater before? So you were expecting it, right?
Yes, a couple of us who had done this before. So they did tell us it's not gonna be easy, and they kept on scaring us. But knowing them, you sometimes Bolra. He's saying something. We don't care. We'll find out when we get there. So, but it was worth the climb.
Okay.
I like going up incline, so I enjoyed it.
Right. So tell me why you used to tell me it was worth it, right? Obviously it was worth it. You're doing it for the sheer pleasure, for the sort of the challenge, but tell me about the joy.
So we were 14 of us, right? And one thing that I got out of this trip is at the end of the trip, right? Every one of us, I think, stopped calling each other by name, but it was more like bye, sab theek hai, bye, kya ho raha hai? And it was like a close knit, relationship that we built with each one of us. And at the end of the third day, and the joy was that we got to spend time with each other. We got to see, understand each other more closely, how every rider is. Look at the physical as well as mental attitude of each person, because you may be physically fit, but at the end of the day, if you're mentally weak, you're going to give up halfway through. But everyone pushed it through. That was a really good achievement, I would say. Okay.
I'm going to translate just for the minute, bhai kya ho raha, which is, brother, how you doing? But it's amazing. So Pallav, it seems like Nishant's the expert and you were sort of the little bit of a newbie. Are you going to do it again?
With this group, yeah, I would do it again.
Let me ask you, how many flats? How many bike flats?
Nishant fixed them all probably.
Yeah, probably. Do you count? Keep a log or whatever?
So we had one flat actually, as far as I know. There was only one person had a flat throughout the journey.
How about brakes?
Unfortunately, the same person.
Yeah, we had one bike that needed extra tender loving care. One of the bikes, sort of the screws of the rack got loose, and so they couldn't carry that bag, and somebody else had to carry it on their behalf. So there were a couple of issues. I myself, like you said, I was a new rider, so I myself didn't sort of listen as we were talking in the WhatsApp group as much as I should have. But there were conversations. Make sure you get comfortable with your bike. Take it out for a ride. Make sure that the bike. And so one of the first things I had in my day was on the first day was my seat was not correct, and that caused me a lot of problems into day 2 and 3. And at that time I was thinking, I should have listened to somebody and tested out the seat, with a 10-mile ride or a 15-mile ride beforehand. And I think there were some things about handlebars, some recommendations that Nishant and others in the group were providing that I think we novices could have listened to and taken more seriously, I guess one could say.
Interesting. Were you guys all men, or men and women and kids even, or what was the breakup?
So this trip was just for men. And we are planning one more in August, which is with the family. So we'll have women as well as kids.
Oh, so 184.5 miles of with kids?
No, so that's going to be no. So that's going to be from so it's going to be broken into 50, 25, 12 mile.
Isn't August too hot for this kind of thing? I mean, I would imagine like people will be. You have to wait until September, October. I mean, even November, I would think.
So Sienna Canal is always covered. The towpath is always covered with.
That is true.
So you hardly get any sunlight, and it's nice and cooler.
Day 2, you said, was big slack water, right? And that was the big adventure. And then mostly it was just mostly flat riding.
So as soon as you get done with the detour, and then you get on the Potomac again. I forget the name of the that location, but you're basically riding right on the river. So they have built. Oh yeah, it's like right next. So if you were not paying attention, you could fall in the river. It's a very beautiful path that they have built around the mountain that touches the river. So it's definitely worth going for a trip for.
And nobody's like, I'm going to fall. This is too scary. I'm going to fall into the river. No,
okay. Just keep your eyes on the road. Or the path. But I think the day 2 was interesting. So there was, when we started at Hancock, there was a bike shop that I guess opened at 8 or 9. Can't remember, but 8. So I think a lot of people were there. Sort of, I think from the first day, tires needed to get fixed, air needed to be filled. I myself got another seat, put handlebars on the bike. So I think everybody was kind of, after the first day, whatever needed to be done on the bike, we used that. It was called CNO Bicycle. I think it was a store right on the canal. So we patronized that place quite a bit with all of us.
This is interesting. So midway, you kind of figured out the problems with your equipment and you tried to fix that.
Yeah, probably not.
But that's hundreds of dollars sometimes.
Well, yeah, that, or it's a tough ride for the next 2 days, right? So
mine is a DS2. It's a mountain bike. I converted it into a drop-down bike. So that way I have multiple positions, drop-down handlebar. So what happens is at this point, you have multiple positions to hold your bike, and it also helps in keeping your wrist relaxed. So when Pallav says I cheated to get my bike fitted to me, is basically I went to a bike store and I said, I've been riding for X number of miles and I have a pain in my back or my neck. And then what they do is they have a angle measurements. So they make you sit on the bike on a trainer, and then they would look at the position that you sit in. They would recommend seat to be changed if needs to be. They would put in the stem of the that holds the handlebar. They would make increase the angle or decrease the angle based on whether your body angle is correct or in align with your bike or not. So I got that done before the long ride. So I knew that my body is not going to hurt as much as it did before. And even before I went for the ride, I think I went for a couple of long rides on Sienna to see if the fitting was working for me or not.
If somebody wants to do this, where should they start?
Join our group. No, but in all seriousness,
No, I think that's a great idea. I think that's a fantastic idea. Okay.
So a couple of places that we definitely looked into. One is a Facebook group. It's called CNO Canal and Great Allegheny Pathway. So definitely join that group. They are very helpful. Any questions that you have, they will respond like in a couple of minutes. And the other good resource is their CNO Canal's website. It's called canaltrust.org, which gives you very detailed picture of the whole trip from end to end, from Cumberland all the way to DC. And they have a way to you can set up your trip plan. And it gives you all the rest where there are, you'll be able to get water, where there are bathrooms. Everything is on their website. It's very detailed, very well put together.
Did you guys have evacuation plans?
Yeah, I mean, so we did. One of the comments I made to one of the other bikers was somebody should put markers down where there is cell reception. So, you don't kind of, because in some cases you may want to call out, but you don't know, do you go 2 miles this way or 2 miles that way to get reception?
That's a great suggestion. Right to the National Park Service. I feel like I need to ask you guys to say your piece about the rain.
Now, again, you have to remember 14 people, third day. So now everybody's at different paces, right? First day, I think it was a little bit more closer. Everybody had energy, but now you're kind of seeing people spaced out. So you had a group of, 4-4-4 type of thing. And some people were riding and stopping more and just enjoying the scenery. So what happened is we all kind of got together at White's Ferry. I was one of the first ones there because I was like, I just need to keep going, because if I stop, I might not be able to start again. So my mindset on day 3 was very little breaks. So we got to White's Ferry, everybody was having lunch, and it started to rain and pour. And in the WhatsApp group, I think somebody had mentioned raincoats, which we didn't have. Some of us didn't have. Didn't think of the possibility, I guess. So we actually at White's Ferry asked the person for garbage bags and plastic bags and whatever we could get our hands on. And those were the raincoats. Put a little hole in a trash bag and it serves its purpose.
So the towpath is pressed gravel up to Violet Lock. And then after it's gravel. It's much harder to ride on because the ground keeps on shifting under your bike. It's loose. So, and when it rains, it gets even more mushy. So it was really hard the last day to get to DC from Violet Lock.
And it was getting in our chains also, right? So those little pebbles as you're biking and it's wet, it kind of, throws itself up and it gets jammed in the gear. So you could kind of hear a little crunch as you sort of pedal. So, and the everything that you had that you were carrying in the back is getting wet. So it's getting heavier.
South Asian Indians in particular, we have a strong tendency for heart disease. We have a strong tendency also for diabetes. Are you talking about that a lot? Or is it more about, come on, let's go, we'll have a good time? Essentially brotherhood at this.
I myself am touching 50 now. So, Nishant is a little bit younger. So for me, I think that comes a little bit more to the forefront kind of stay active and stuff. So I think from that perspective, yeah, biking is another activity. But again, it's not that regular in terms of a routine. But generally, just kind of eat a little well and stay active for me personally, from an exercise perspective, is sort of how I think about it.
What about the cultural aspects of this? I mean, this is an all Indian group. What is the benefit of having one, or is it just like happenstance that, happens to be all Indian?
No, I don't think it's a happenstance. So again, there are a few people that in the group that organized this. We were just kind of together. When we were together, the conversation came up to do this. But there is a WhatsApp group. It's called Desi Runners, Desi Walkers. So I mean, naturally you expect a lot of Desis to be there, and so I think it wasn't planned, but because the group was made up of, Desis, it was natural that, 14 people kind of just signed up. And it just turned out that this group, all guys went, everybody sort of knew each other. So if Nishant signed up, hey, take his friend. And my friend Rahul is the one who said, hey, I'm doing it. Why don't you do it too? So it was kind of like that. And it just happened to be all Desis in this case.
It's amazing, right? How what we do is determined by the networks we keep.
Yeah.
It's almost expectation that what we do builds our networks, but that's not what it is. It's actually the reverse, is that our networks, circumscribe what you do. Well, Pallav Thakkar, Nishant Trivedi, thank you for coming on I Hit Politics. Good luck in your next bike rides. And I hope to hear more about your adventures. I want to say I do appreciate people that organize these things, even though I don't get there. I think often enough, but I know how much work it is to put even, to get 14 people, 15 people from Cumberland to Washington, D.C. safely.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. No, thanks. Thanks for having us. It was good for us to be able to share, and hopefully, somebody uses this to take their own trip. If it's not 180 miles, at least something just to get out there and, get on their bikes.
A drunken buzz, much like any other. I can play better than this one, that's all. Like a hill of grape shot, he hit the ceiling. The ginger man really shook the walls. We've been looking for something.
That was Nishant Trivedi and Pallav Thakkar, who took a 184.5 mile bike ride from Cumberland, Maryland to Washington, D.C. last April. Desi is a term often used by Indian Americans and South Asian Americans more generally to refer to themselves. Roughly, it translates to natives or countrymen. I'll be back with Maryland House of Delegates Majority Leader Eric Lutke to talk about parks.
That dear Boris knows his music's the hood. We look for a reason and answer. Sign on the chair of the cherry. Not to be taken away. Not taken away.
Eric Lutke, welcome back to I Hit Politics.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
We're going to talk state parks today, apparently.
Yes, and it's going to be fantastic. It's like my favorite thing to talk about because our state parks are freaking awesome.
Okay. All right. How many state parks do we have?
So that's a more complicated question than you would think. Depending on how you count them, my count is 75. But what we call the state parks, there's parks that are called state parks, but then we also have state battlefields, and we've got natural environment areas and natural resource management areas. So, it's a little more complicated than you would think, but it's growing. It's growing because we're building new parks, finally.
Do you know what their budgets are like? I mean, how many people they employ?
Like many state agencies right now, they are underfunded. I don't know off the top of my head their total budget. I'll tell you that total rangers and park service associates, so the folks that are forward facing in the parks, we're talking in the range of about 300 people. And that has stayed the same despite the fact that Marylanders are going to their parks like never before. So 10 years ago, the parks were getting about 10 million visits a year. Last year, they got 22 million with the same number of staff and essentially the same budget. So you can imagine the stress that's been putting on our park system.
Sure, but do you expect that 22 million to drop off now that COVID is hopefully in the decline?
That's a really interesting question. And it's a question, this is not just a Maryland phenomenon. It's the national parks, it's state parks all over the country. It's local parks are seeing it. It's a really big question in the recreation world. I think it'll drop off a little bit, but not that much. I think what happened as a result of the pandemic is in looking for an opportunity to spend time outside, people discovered places that they never knew existed. And now they want to go to those places. And that's going to be ongoing. And also, that increase, some of it was before the pandemic, right? We were already seeing those increases before the pandemic, particularly in Central Maryland, particularly around water features like lakes and rivers and things like that. Just to understand the scale of what we're talking about, as we're recording this, last weekend was Memorial Day weekend. I know it's not going to air right after Memorial Day weekend, but there were 20 parks in Maryland that had to shut their gates at some point during the day because they were overcrowded, right? Seneca was one of them. And when Seneca, after the weekend ended, the Rangers went around to pick up trash from all the visitors that had visited. And, the trash cans get over full and, some people litter, and they had 3 truckloads of trash. Just at a very basic level, it becomes a safety issue. If you've got, some of these parks have so many visitors, they essentially become small cities, right? If you've got tens of thousands of people in a park and 5 staff, that's dangerous.
What do they do now? How do they manage that problem now?
They do their best.
With the closings that you mentioned over Memorial Day, like 20 parks had to close down, right? That's not a staffing problem. That's like just a capacity problem, right?
Right.
And what are you doing for that?
So that's where that money comes in, the capital money. So
it's 150 million all in capital?
Yes, the 150 million is all capital.
Okay.
So, a portion of that will go to critical maintenance. And, those critical maintenance projects increase capacity.
What do you mean by critical maintenance?
So bathrooms that need to be updated and aren't working effectively anymore, roadways, campsites that are, falling apart, things like that. A large portion of that money is going to be going towards building new amenities and, frankly, building new parks. We just don't have enough parks, particularly parks in Central Maryland that are near water, to satisfy all of the folks that want to visit them. And we have some parks that are in Central Maryland and near water where we've just never invested to build the facilities necessary to sustain the visitorship they're getting or could get.
What is an example?
So Patuxent River is a great example. Patuxent River State Park borders, as you might guess, the Patuxent River. There is no picnic area anywhere in that park that borders the river, right? It would be incredibly popular, and it would relieve some of the pressure on Seneca and Patapsco because it's right in between those 2 state parks. We're going to be creating, hopefully, new parks in Anne Arundel. There's conversations about a new park in Cecil County, although that's a little controversial. The other big one we've talked about is a place called Carr's Beach in Anne Arundel County, which is a bayside beach that has really important history. It was, beach going used to be segregated. If you've ever been to Sandy Point State Park, there's 2 beaches at Sandy Point, right? There's the South Beach, which is the one closer to the Bay Bridge, and then there was what's called the East Beach. Well, The reason there's two beaches is when that park opened, the white folks went to the South Beach and the black folks went to the East Beach, right? So all the beaches along the bay used to be segregated. Carr's Beach was an important beach for black families in Maryland, and was culturally really important in the history of the state. So the state and city of Annapolis have invested money in purchasing that property, and that's going to be a new park. So, but part of the issue is, in the bill, we looked at these three sites in particular because we knew there were potential opportunities there. But creating new parks takes time. It takes finding large sections of land that, the state either has or could purchase that are suitable for recreation. So, the money there is enough that we'll be able to build several new parks over the next few years, but we don't necessarily know exactly where all of those parks are going to be.
Is there any plan to build any more lakes?
As of right now, the answer is no. Part of the reason for that is a lot of these lakes that we built were built, in the New Deal era up through the 1970s, right? So Lake Habib, for example, at Rocky Gap State Park was a recreational lake that was built, I believe, in the early 70s. It's a great spot, and they have dragon boat races there every year, which is kind of a cool little niche thing. But part of the issue is we've come to better understand the damage that dam building can do to natural rivers and streams. And so Maryland has actually been reducing its number of dams over time, particularly in the Patapsco Valley, where we removed a huge dam just a few years ago called the Daniels Dam to restore a free-flowing natural river. So I doubt we'll see new recreational lakes. What we're looking at is better utilizing our existing recreational lakes and potentially providing new water access stream side. Because, it's not just lakes, right? People also like going in creeks. They like going in rivers. One of the most popular places in the state parks is in Rock State Park, or in Gunpowder Valley State Park also, where people will bring inner tubes and they'll ride the river, right? So things like that. I mean, for example, could Clopper Lake in Seneca Creek State Park, could that have a swimming beach on it? It doesn't right now.
What does it take to have a swimming beach?
Sand, a lot of sand.
You're not building any more lakes because they're not environmentally friendly, but you're going to, bring in hundreds of truckloads of sand to build a swimming feature. Is that okay?
I mean, I think environmentalists have fewer concerns about it. I think it doesn't create the same issues with disruption of wildlife and issues with damaging the hydrology and of a stream that creating an entirely new lake would. And remember also, Clopper Lake's an artificial lake, so we're adding something artificial to something artificial.
Also, I've heard that Maryland doesn't have a single natural lake.
That is true. Every single lake in the state of Maryland is artificial. So, and some of the big ones that people are familiar with were actually built for energy production.
Is Deep Creek still producing electricity?
No, I don't. It doesn't produce electricity anymore. The state purchased it from the company that owned it years ago, and actually more recently, only about 20 years ago. And Governor Glendenning loves to tell this story because it happened during his governorship. We actually had to purchase the lake bed. So Deep Creek is two state parks. It's the Deep Creek State Park, which is on land, which is gorgeous and has a corduroy road, which is, I can go into that later if you want, but it's a really unique hiking opportunity. But then there's also Deep Creek Lake Natural Resources Management Area, which is the lake itself, which is a separate unit of the park system. And we had to do that so the State Park Service could better manage dock installations, things like that for all the people that use the lake for recreation.
Does Maryland have any hydropower production?
No, actually, one of the biggest, it might be the biggest dam in Maryland is up on the Susquehanna River. You can see it if you're driving 95 north when you cross the Susquehanna and look to your left. You can see a dam off in the distance. That's the Conowingo Dam, and it still produces electricity. It's also a major environmental issue because the reservoir behind the Conowingo is largely filled in with silt and sediment. So an increasing amount of pollution from Pennsylvania, New York, from largely from agriculture in Pennsylvania, New York, is getting washed past the dam into the Chesapeake Bay. So it's contributing to our water pollution problems in the bay.
So does the Park Service also control the Conowingo Dam, for example?
No, that's privately owned, and that's managed by the Maryland Department of the Environment, which raises a really interesting point. Like land management and water management in Maryland and everywhere in the country is an incredible checkerboard of agencies and private companies and nonprofits that own pieces of it, right? So, the bill I worked on this year with Senator Elfreth and Governor Glendening, the Great Maryland Outdoors Act, was focused specifically on the state parks. But when you think about state lands and lands in the state, it's a lot more than that, right? People that recreate, sometimes they go to state parks, sometimes it's state forests, sometimes land trusts like the Nature Conservancy, sometimes quasi-governmental organizations like WSSC. So there are plenty of people that recreate on the Susquehanna, but most of the Susquehanna is not owned by the state.
So this is a public policy show. And you mentioned that there's a checkerboard of agencies, nonprofits and private companies that manage the land in Maryland and, of course, elsewhere as well. But in Maryland, what does this sort of crisscross of management and authorities, what does it do to our parks and our, how they are managed and maintained?
WSSC lands, it's lands that they've purchased around the reservoirs to protect the drinking water and the quality of that water. Their main job is not recreation. In fact, to some extent, they want to discourage certain types of recreation that reduce water quality in the reservoirs. So, you run into fundamental conflicts when the missions aren't, in compliance with each other. And that can be an issue.
Right. And obviously, so how do you balance those?
It's a constant conversation. And frankly, that's part of the role of elected officials, I think, right? Because, in some ways, we're kind of like ombudsmen for government and for our communities. So, a lot of what I do on this lands work is I try to get people talking to each other, right? So to go back, so I mentioned a second ago, Freedman State Historical Park, which is this new park we're creating. It's focused on the story of Black Marylanders, both before and after emancipation in Montgomery County. It's the first Black history-focused state park on the Western Shore. But one of the cool things about it is it's designed to be what's called a partnership park, which is essentially a park where all these different land managers come together. They designate some portion of their lands as a part of the park, but the Park Service isn't necessarily managing the land itself in every part of the park, right? It's a model that's been used very effectively by the National Park Service, particularly in some historical parks in more urban areas, right? So if Freedman's comes to fruition in the way that we hope it will, there will be portions of Freedman State Historical Park that are state-owned and under the direct control and management of the State Park Service. There will be portions that are county parks, portions that are owned by nonprofits like the Sandy Spring Museum and the Sandy Spring Slave Museum, but they will all coordinate under this structure of the status of the partnership park.
The other question I had is in Carr's Beach, right? Mm-hmm. You said that there's local money behind it.
Sure.
Is local money necessary in order to build a new park?
It's not necessary. It shouldn't be necessary. Sometimes it is what kickstarts a project, and so because we've been underfunding parks at the state level for so long, a lot of our county park systems have stepped up. In some cases, actually, county park systems manage what are quote unquote state parks, right?
Example?
The Matthew Henson Trail in Montgomery County.
Okay.
That's technically it is legally a state park that's leased to the county, and it's really run by county parks, right? So the county parks have stepped up to their credit.
If I'm hearing you correctly, you're saying that, counties such as Montgomery that are wealthy, have functioning parks agencies, and they essentially are taking up and leading the effort. In fact, coordinating often across the various authorities that are land managers in the state. But others, that are not as wealthy as Montgomery would not have, there they you'll find greater degradation in the state,
or just lack of access to recreational amenities.
correct. And in your bill, when you targeted capital investments, did you think about that, and how did you redistribute, in effect, the capital money so that it didn't go to those that had it but went to those that didn't?
Sure. We did think about it. It was a major part of the conversations we had. And actually, the Park Service on their own had been thinking about it for a number of years. They've developed something, and you can Google it and look at it online, something called the Maryland Park Equity Tool. And what it does is it analyzes the parts of the state that have a lack of access to the outdoors, to recreational amenities. Those areas, as you might suspect, are concentrated in less wealthy communities, in communities of color, and in some rural communities. Rural communities is an interesting one because I think a lot of people have this idea that, if you live in a rural area, you have tons of access to the outdoors. Well, not necessarily. In a lot of those rural communities, it's, a lot of that land is private land and you can't access it. So we required the Park Service, in looking at where to build parks, to consider the park equity tool. We also mandated, and this is a big one because one of the big challenges with our state parks is there's not a single state park in the state of Maryland that can be reliably accessed using mass transit. There isn't a single one, right? Reliably and safely accessed. Some of them, there's a park, there's a bus that stops, half a mile away, and I guess you could walk there if you want. But take Patapsco, for example. Patapsco Valley State Park was originally built to serve the city of Baltimore. That's why it was built, right? It was supposed to be Baltimore's big natural area, even though it's outside of the city itself. You can't get there from the city of Baltimore by transit. So we required the State Department of Transportation to begin piloting transit access to some of these parks. And there are definite opportunities there, right? There's the yellow line, which is one of the bus lines in the Baltimore region, stops in Catonsville, only a couple miles away from one of the major areas, recreational areas of Patapsco. You could run transit there. You could run transit east out of the city to North Point, which is a state park that's on the bay.
All right. Give me your favorite state parks. Rank them.
Oh my God. How many do I get to pick?
Go for 10.
Yeah, I don't know that these are necessarily ranked because I can't work that fast in my head. Seneca's fantastic. And that's the state park I grew up going to. I lost so many Frisbees in the Frisbee golf course there. So Seneca Creek State Park is amazing. Janes Island State Park outside of Crisfield, much of which you have to get to by boat. It's some islands just offshore in the Chesapeake Bay. Gorgeous place. Patapsco, the heart of the Maryland park system, can never not visit that. Greenwell State Park along the lower bay in southern Maryland is a great place. Cedarville also, which was originally built as a civilian conservation corps site in Prince George's County. Swallow Falls. I would recommend, if you go to Swallow Falls in Garrett County, go in the winter, because the mist from the waterfalls turns the entire river valley where the falls are into, I swear to God, something that looks like it's in a movie. Like it's a winter wonderland. It is amazing. Rocks State Park in Harford County, gorgeous place, great hiking. What else? Tuckahoe in the central eastern shore. One of the coolest canoe trips I ever took. We got in this little mill pond in Tuckahoe with a rented canoe, and just, we were just killing time. We canoe upstream, and I counted more than 60 turtles in like a half mile of canoeing. I mean, just a stunning place. I'll add Gatland, which is part of the Appalachian Trail. Really, the entire Appalachian Trail in Maryland is fantastic. Just south of there, I think it's part of South Mountain State Park. I'll finish on this one. is a place called the Weaverton Cliffs. And Weaverton's it's not really a town. It's just a couple buildings, just a little bit south of Harper's Ferry. And the Appalachian Trail at the Weaverton Cliffs comes up on the where the Potomac River has cut through the mountain range there. And just one of the most gorgeous views you will ever see of the Potomac River is just like a 1.5 mile hike up from the parking lot to the Weaverton Cliffs. And I mean, I can sit there for hours and watch the sunset over Virginia, and watch the rapids down in the Potomac. Have you ever been to Mallows Bay? That's
No.
a non-state park area. Okay. Oh my God. In World War I, the United States needed more shipping. So we started building ships out of concrete, which actually works. I didn't know it worked, but they built all these ships and then the war ended and we had all these extra ships and we're like, what are we going to do with them? So we sunk a bunch of them in the Potomac River at a place called Mallows Bay. And you can go out there on a kayak and kayak between these shipwrecks that now have, plants growing out of them and osprey nesting on them. And it is one of the coolest places in the state of Maryland, and nobody's ever heard of it.
Where is it?
It's in Charles County on the Potomac River.
Wow. I did not know that. Well, you did hold the best for the last then.
Yeah, we've got a long list of trips. I'm going to take you to all these places, man.
All right, Eric, I look forward to it.
Mouth to mouth, going house to house, word is out. Now it seems focus is on me, dare I speak.
What lessons can we draw from my conversation with Maryland House Majority Leader Eric Lutke and Indian-American biking aficionados Nishant Trivedi and Pallav Thakkar? Get out the bike. Get outdoors. Can't be more forthright. That's all for this episode. You've been listening to I Hate Politics. I'm Sunil Dasgupta. Music for this episode comes from the Treading Lemmings, a Rockville-based Britpop band. If you want to share your music on the show or know someone else who might want to, please email us at ihppod@gmail.com or reach out on Twitter at ihppod. See you outside.